Hello, my name's Cameron, and welcome to The Forum, the Canadian news show dedicated to the conversation. We've got quite a lineup of news today, so let's get right into it. Our first story of the day is the always interesting topic of Ontario politics. But today, we're going to do something interesting and actually talk about the NDP. That's because the Liberals have recently targeted the Ontario NDP for a mathematical error in their budget proposal. On Monday, Andrea Horwath, the leader of the NDP, said that her party is actually going to stick to the current plan and not change it, even though the mathematical error is going to cost the party $1.4 billion more per year than expected. Now, the error itself seems to be kind of stupid. It's the miscounting of $700 million in annual reserve fund that was counted as revenue rather than as expenditure. Now, the Liberal leader, Kathleen Wynne, said that the NDP has the responsibility to change this error and even the platform itself as soon as possible. Now, the errors have since been fixed on the NDP online platform, but Wynne says the problem goes even further. Quote from Wynne, "People are counting on us as politicians in the province. They're counting on us to be able to put forward a plan and to be able to be clear about what the impact of that plan would be." Now, the NDP initially said that they would run a $3.3 billion deficit from 2018 to 2019, but now with this error taken into account, that number jumps from 3.3 to $4.7 billion. Now, to compare that to the other parties, the Liberal budget projects a $6.7 billion deficit in the first year, and the Progressive Conservatives haven't put out their numbers yet, but they have stated that their budget would project a deficit in the first year. Now, looking at the story, I think it's easy to see how this mathematical error shows the incompetence of the leaders or the party itself. And while I would agree that a mistake like this can't just be overlooked, I think that there's something refreshing about the way that the party, unabashedly owned up to this mistake and still sticks by their platform. And I think that the way Horwath and the NDP handled themselves in the midst of this may actually end up making themselves seem better in the eyes of the constituent. But what do you guys think? Do you think this mathematical error shows the incompetence of the NDP and their untrustworthiness to govern the province? Or is it a little more complicated than that? Maybe the individuals within the party, instead of the party itself, should be held accountable. Whatever your thoughts are, throw them in the comments down below. And for our second story today, we're going to talk about the drama that's going on between the premiers of British Columbia and Alberta, because there is more. Now, the update to this story is that the premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley, has decided not to go to the Western Premiers Conference. Now, other provinces got word that Notley wouldn't be attending the conference on Saturday of last week, and instead she'd be sending the Deputy Premier, Sarah Hoffman, to the Northwest Territories for the conference. This latest move comes amid Kinder Morgan's self-imposed deadline for moving ahead with the Trans Mountain Pipeline project. The company will decide by May 31st whether it will continue with plans to expand the Trans Mountain Pipeline from north of Edmonton to the coast in Burnaby. Notley has decided not to attend the meeting because she says she's focused on ensuring that the project goes through, with the deadline quickly approaching. The meeting was expected to formally deal with the issue of national pharmacare, as well as handling the legalization of recreational marijuana. When asked last week about the meeting with Notley, Horgan, the Premier of BC, said that he wasn't, quote, expecting any surprises. He further stated, quote, "We have a disagreement on one issue. Our values are lockstep. We've been friends for 20 years. I believe that the risk of diluted bitumen spill to economy, to our environment, is too great. I doubt there will be any surprises next week." Now, for those of you that didn't know, and I personally didn't, diluted bitumen is one of the types of crude oil that comes from our Canadian oil sands. And it's described as being heavy and sour. And while we're talking about the Trans Mountain Pipeline, we've now gotten news that the federal government has actually approved a plan by Finance Minister Bill Morneau to compensate Kinder Morgan for any losses that they would accumulate due to British Columbia's interference with the pipeline. And the Alberta legislator is actually taking aim at BC directly. Last week, the province voted in favor of legislation that would allow the province to dictate how much fuel is sent to other provinces. And Alberta has actually threatened to use this new legislation against BC if it continues to stand in the way of this new Trans Mountain project. About this legislation, Notley said, quote, "We have to make progress on this pipeline. As Albertans, we have to be able to maximize the return we receive for our resources as well as we can, and ultimately, our ability to do that is good for the national economy. Albertans, British Columbians, and all Canadians should understand that if the path forward for the pipeline through BC is not settled soon, I'm ready and prepared to turn off the taps. But questions still remain if Notley's actually able to restrict the flow of oil and gas to British Columbia. Now, BC Attorney General David Eby said that this legislation is actually unconstitutional and that his province will move forward to challenge the constitutional validity of this at the Court of Queen's Bench of Alberta as early as this week. So with just over a week before Kinder Morgan's self-imposed deadline, we have two provinces in complete disagreement over this pipeline, and Alberta threatening to cut off BC's fuel, and BC saying that it's not even able to do that. And as far as the government being willing to pay for inconveniences caused by British Columbia to Kinder Morgan, I think that's a step too far. Now, disregarding any possible needs for this pipeline, I think Morneau's plan shows other private sector corporations just how much this administration is willing to give corporate entities. And I can only hope that other corporations don't take advantage of that, and that this is just a one-time thing. Now, this is a really complicated story, so I highly recommend you read it yourself. I'm going to put the links to the full stories down below, as I do with all my stories. And for our last story, we turn to Nova Scotia, where construction of Canada's only commercial spaceport has now been pushed back. Stephen Matier, the president and CEO of Maritime Launch Services Limited, said that he had hoped to break ground this month on the $200 million project that could eventually see as many as 12 satellite launches per year. But now Matier says that the launch site located in Canso, Nova Scotia on the eastern shore won't be developed until later this year, although he didn't indicate any new timeline. Now, to be clear, the project doesn't aim to put humans into space, but rather it aims at firms that want to put satellites in the air for imaging or communications, anything like that. Now, the project is a private sector venture, but it does require the province's okay as far as environmental concerns go. Now, there are plenty more hurdles for Matier and Maritime Launch Services Limited to go over, but Matier says that he has made good progress. Last week, he met with provincial and federal officials, as well as aerospace companies, environmental firms, and engineering firms, among others. He also visited the site in Canso, Nova Scotia, and met with a community group there that included officials from Guysborough County, as well as the fishing industry and the residents themselves. The assessment will also go to the Natural Resources Department as part of the company's Crown Land Lease application. Matier said that this process should take around 50 days. Now, Maritime Launch Services Limited is still aiming for the first launches to be from 2021 to 2022. Now, for those of you that want to watch these launches, Matier has indicated that there will be vantage points at Little Dover, Nova Scotia, 8 kilometers south of Canso, where the site is. And this is honestly the coolest news that I've heard in a while. I think that Nova Scotia is a great place to put something like a spaceport, and it would provide so many jobs that Nova Scotians would welcome. And that's where I'm going to end today's show. If you have any thoughts about the last story or any of the stories I talked about today, put them in the comments down below and, we can have a dialogue come the weekend show. As well, all the links to the full stories are going to be in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.